Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Jamaica, and thank you for joining us for another post-cabinet press briefing. And today it is a good lineup. We have Minister Favour Williams here with us. We also have Minister Vaz, Daryl Vaz, is also here with us, and we have a special guest, Mr. Ansard Hewitt, who is the Director General of OUR. He is also here to discuss the restoration of electricity and general matters in relation to the OUR. And as always, I will begin with some quick updates before we get to Minister Williams, who will be first up. The National Cleanup Program. I know last week in a question from the media, I had mentioned the launch of this National Cleanup Program. And so on Wednesday, after post-cabinet press briefing last week, the Prime Minister, the Most Honourable Andrew Holness, launched a national campaign to remove bulky waste and eliminate mosquito breeding sites in communities following the passage of Hurricane Beryl. And we know a lot of persons have been complaining about mosquitoes. We have all been experiencing it. We've seen the mosquitoes. They're bigger than normal and they bite hotter than normal. So we have obviously been listening, and that is a priority of the government. So in addition to the work that the Ministry of Health is doing in relation to fogging, we also have to remove bulky waste and a lot of the breeding sites for mosquitoes. And so this program is the Derelict Vehicles and Bulky Waste Removal Program, and it is led by the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development in collaboration with the National Solid Waste Management Authority. And it will encompass extensive cleanup, bushing and debris removal across the island. And the NSWMA has been allocated over $500 million to execute this program, and the campaign will focus on removing old cars, we see them all over the place, refrigerators and other bulky waste that we see in many of our communities across Jamaica. And as you'll recall, we had 50 new trucks, garbage trucks, that had been acquired in June. And in that delivery of trucks, we also got compactors, cranes, tippers, and scout trucks. And those will all be used in the national cleanup effort. And so I think you'll all agree that those trucks came in at the right time. We know that those in Portmore have particularly been complaining. They say that their mosquitoes are more active than everybody else's. And so we have listened again, and 100 workers from the local government, between local government and NSWMA, will be deployed to the municipality to assist with cleanup activities. I will also speak to the social housing program. As you would have seen too, the government has delivered 244 homes to date under the new social housing program. And when you deliver one house, it's not for one person. Usually it's an entire family that is benefiting from it. And so over 900 Jamaicans already have benefited from the social housing initiative, this social housing initiative. It was launched in 2018 by Prime Minister Holness, and the aim of it is to enhance the housing conditions for the country's vulnerable population by providing quality, affordable, and sustainable units. And under this program, each Member of Parliament has been asked to nominate 5 individuals from their constituencies to receive this housing support. So this goes to those who are most needy and living in conditions that none of us would be happy to see our families living in. And so this is a very important initiative, and we're very happy to have gotten to 244 homes being delivered. In terms of our hospitals, Falmouth Hospital renovation is one to note. On Friday, July 26, Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. the Honourable Christopher Tufton, officially opened a newly renovated operating theatre at the Falmouth Public General Hospital in Trelawney. The hospital in this renovation now has 4 fully equipped and operational theatres, significantly enhancing its ability to provide quality healthcare services to the public. And so the operating theaters is just one of two facilities that have undergone upgrades at the hospital, totaling $100 million. In addition to that, at the same hospital, Falmouth Hospital, there's a major overhaul of the hospital's walkway that was recently completed at a cost of $49 million. The outdated structures have all been replaced with modern covered pathways facilitating easier movement of patients and staff between buildings. And we believe that our health infrastructure is something that we have to prioritize. We've been prioritizing it. We will continue to prioritize it. And it's very nice to see the embodiment of all of that commitment that we have said that we have towards improving our healthcare sector. I'll also just note that the Chase Fund has also agreed to support the post-burial recovery efforts to the tune of $110 million. And so the Chase Fund, which is a culture, health, arts, sports, and education fund, will invest this money in a wide range of sectors. Of course, Minister Favour Williams will be very happy to hear that the early childhood education sector will receive $50 million for roof repairs and other damage at infant schools. We know it's a lot more, and the minister will tell you how much money she really needs. But similarly, $50 million will also be allocated to our health system in order to assist in repairs of healthcare facilities. And then really importantly, another $10 million will be directed towards the recovery of heritage sites, libraries, and cultural spaces within the arts and culture sector. And that's really an area that we sometimes forget, but it is very important that we also direct some of the assistance there. There were a lot of things that were discussed at Cabinet, but I think I want to get to the ministers and to our Director General of OUR, and if there is time at the end, I will give some further updates. And so first up is the Honourable Favour Williams, our Minister of Education and Youth, and she is also here with her esteemed Permanent Secretary, Dr. Kassan Troop. And so, Minister Williams, I invite you to tell us about all of the hard work that you are doing.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Let me begin by acknowledging my colleague minister, Senator the Honourable Dana Morris Dixon. I know that colleague Minister of Science, Energy and Technology and Transport will be here as well. He's outside, I understand. Let me acknowledge as well my team from the Ministry of Education and Youth. This morning we have our Permanent Secretary, Dr. Kassan Troop. We have our Chief Education Officer Acting, Terry and Thomas Gale. We have the Executive Director of the National Education Trust, Mrs. Latoya Harris-Garty. Let me acknowledge as well members of the team from the OUR, and we have Director General here this morning, members of the media, principals, teachers, administrators, students, and families who may be online, Jamaicans all, good morning. This morning we are here to give an update to the nation on our restoration efforts at our schools since the passage of Hurricane Beryl, which wrought damage in varying degrees to almost 45% of our, I'd say almost, of our 1,009 infant, primary, and secondary schools. As you may recall, Beryl hit Jamaica on Wednesday, July 3, and I am putting that date down because immediately after that, Thursday and Friday, our teams spread out across Jamaica to assess the damage to our schools and the ministry buildings across Jamaica. Looking at the timeline then, right after the hurricane, in the immediate aftermath of Hurricane Beryl, we knew we only had about 8 weeks to fix torn off roofs, damaged doors, windows, and walls, landslides, breakaway retaining walls, and other damage to our schools. So it was important for us to do a rapid assessment as to the scope of work that would be required and to begin the procurement and deployment of contractors. I really want to thank the teams at the Ministry of Education and Youth, in particular our team at the National Education Trust, led by Mrs. Latoya Garte, that is responsible for larger construction projects, and the team at the Technical Services Unit within the ministry, led by Mr. Kerry Brown. We deployed 34 building officers, 4 quantity surveyors, 2 civil engineers, 2 project managers who are engineers in their own right. We also had project officers and other members. We were able to get our hands around the massive damage by prioritizing schools into 3 categories. And that slide should be coming up shortly. So these 3 categories are priority 1, 2, and 3. Priority 1 are those schools that are severely damaged, and the damage may affect school opening. There are 94 of those schools. Our focus is on those schools at the moment because almost 44,000 students attend these 94 schools, and we really want to ensure that they're able to access face-to-face school come September 2nd. Priority 2 are those schools that are moderately damaged. They will require significant repairs, but the scope of that damage suggests that schools can operate while the repairs are being done, and we have 126 of those schools. In priority 3, minor damage, schools can also operate while the repairs are being done, and we have 109 of those schools. So I'm taking the time to go through this because we know come September 2nd, certainly the press will be out there to see how well we've done. And I just want to say to you, for priority 2 and priority 3 schools, you may go to those schools and the work has not been done, and that's because we're saying here again today that work can go on while schools operate. It can go on during the course of this school year. We have a complete list of all the schools that have suffered damage on our website. It's organized by the priority groups, 1, 2, 3, and within each priority group, the data is organized by regions. So this is for all to see in the interest of transparency and for principals to know in which category their schools fall. Let me just talk briefly about the procurement and deployment of contractors for the priority 1 schools, and that would be on page 11 of the presentation. We indicated from the first day of seeing the rapid assessment of the damage to our schools that we would have to use the emergency procurement process given the short space of time, approximately 7 to 8 weeks, in which we have to have the priority number 1 schools in operations. We consulted with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, once with the PSNI and the procurement lawyer at the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, and then we broadened the conversation to include NET and the Technical Services Unit so they could ask any questions and feel comfortable that they are on good footing to deploy this methodology. It is important to do this because emergency procurement is not a process that we have employed at the ministry, at least not since I've been there. And so we wanted to be guided. We are relying on the emergency procurement guidelines as detailed in the GOJ Handbook of Public Sector Procurement Procedures, and in particular, the section on procedures for the procurement of goods, general services, and works. We're guided by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service that this policy is good policy on which we can stand. So it allows us to do the emergency procurement for goods, services, or works in any circumstance in which the national interest and/or national security considerations demand that the procurement be undertaken immediately. And I'm sure you would agree with me that there's a national interest to see all of our schools open for face-to-face school on Monday, September 2nd. The policy also said the need for such procurement must be sudden, unexpected, and a pressing necessity or exigency. Where an emergency situation exists, the procuring entity may engage a contractor by means of direct contracting. Contractors must be registered, possess a valid tax compliance certificate prior to the award, and the head of the procuring entity shall give approval for the issuing of emergency contracts up to a maximum value of $100 million. This approval shall be in writing and shall form part of the procurement record to be kept by the entity. And just to note, contracts awarded under emergency circumstances shall commence immediately. Failure to execute such contracts within 1 month of approval will result in automatic reversion to the general procurement provisions. So you can see we are under significant time pressures here. It is important for me to state this because I know that looking out 3, 4, 5, 6 months, when this hurricane has receded in all of our minds, and the ministry is called to the parliament to explain the expenditure, I want all of us to remember that we declared upfront the procedure we're using, the reason for it, and that all will be well when we've forgotten about the hurricane. So based on the report we received from NET and the Technical Services Unit yesterday, work is underway in many of our schools. I want to pause to thank Chase, as you heard this morning, for the $50 million donation for the early childhood institutions, all our donors who've come on board, all the efforts of the private sector, and I can say everyone has truly rallied to help our schools get back to normalcy as quickly as possible. We thank you ever so much. Beyond the infrastructure damage, we are assessing schools for electricity, water, and telecommunication services. To date, we continue to assess the network of schools across Jamaica. We note that 223 schools have not been reconnected yet to the JPS system. This represents approximately 22% of our schools. We've compiled and sent this information within the last 2 days to the minister to bring to the attention of JPS. These schools are spread across Jamaica, across all 7 regions, with the majority in Region 4 and 5, as you would imagine, that being Westmoreland, Hanover, St. James, and Manchester and St. Elizabeth in Region 5. We will be meeting with our board chairs and principals again this week because we want our schools to begin the cleanup early. Usually, PS, you can guide me, it's a week or 2 before school that the normal cleanup or paint up would start. We want our schools to start earlier. We're asking our principals to begin no later than Monday, August 12th, just in case in the process of the cleanup, items are discovered that need to be replaced or restored, and so we're asking for this earlier deployment. We are ensuring grants to our schools are processed earlier than normal. The regions have some financial resources to help with minor repairs as well. We are committed to working with our boards and principals to enable schools to be reopened on Monday, September 2nd, for the new school year. And let me end with gratitude to the many teachers and principals who have been working assiduously already in the restoration efforts at our school. But there's one slide you must know in terms of the priority schools, the numbers that are there. I can't read them from where I am, unfortunately. But it tells you of the 94 schools, how many have contractors that are already working at the schools, how many have contractors that were given possession of the site, and those contractors are getting ready to deploy and so on. And you can see, I think, only 25 of those schools that we have to do some work to complete. We have to finalize the assessment on those in order to be able to deploy the contractors. So we are well on our way with the priority 1 schools in the time we have left to ensure that they are ready for September 2nd. And for those schools, as I said again, in priority 2 and 3, work will be done during the school year while school is in session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Minister. I don't think you should go too far. Are there questions for Minister Williams?
Good morning, Ministers. Yes, there are questions. Good morning to all the representatives from both ministries here. And let's start off with Jamila from TVJ.
Awesome. Morning, everyone. I'm Jamila Maitland from TVJ News. Minister, aside from the assessments that's going on at the school and to ensure that the physical location is up to standard for September, is the ministry looking at any relief for the households, that's the parents or students, going back to school for September?
I'm sure Senator Dana Morris Dixon could speak to that, because I know the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is definitely looking in terms of care packages and so forth. But Minister, maybe you can answer more succinctly.
Through the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, there are a few paths to support, and of course PATH is one of the key areas of support, and the Ministry of Labor and Social Security has increased the support to individuals in that respect. One of the other areas, we know there has been quite a bit of displacement because of Hurricane Beryl, has been in terms of the home itself, and that is why the priority has been to get the grants to persons who've been affected as quickly as possible. And you know those grants, we had discussed them before, which is $400,000 if your house has been completely destroyed. We have $250,000 if it is severely damaged, and then we have some support for those who had minor damage. And so we're focused very much on having our children be in a space where they can be comfortable and can actually be in a learning mode, and not having no roof and in a condition that's not conducive for learning. So that's been the priority. In terms of our usual support vis-a-vis PATH, that is being done. In terms of tertiary students, we also have a tertiary grant program for students who are having some difficulties in terms of their tertiary education. That is there. So there are multiple avenues of support that we have, and I know the tertiary one is also through the Ministry of Education.
Thank you, Minister. Oh, another from you, Jamila, all right?
Jamila again. Earlier this year, there was an announcement by the ministry about some 30 schools who would benefit for a solar system, something like that being installed. What is the status of that program, being that we're seeing a lot of restoration issues going forward? And also, the pandemic has taught us a little bit about the hybrid approach to school, being that some of these schools right now we're seeing the extent of the damage. Is this something that the ministry is looking to have the principals or the administrators, look into for back to school?
Okay, with regards to the question on solar, a contract was actually issued at least 2 years ago, but the contractors, well, not contractor, but the entity has been unable to find financing. I've asked NET, through whom this was done, to have a relook at this contract. I think we've waited long enough to see how we exit the contract and begin anew again in terms of solarizing our schools. And the second question, sorry, I had to do it. Oh, the hybrid approach, yes. As you know, coming out of the pandemic, we came out with the strength of the virtual world, and we have ensured that since then we have strengthened that in terms of ensuring that all of our teachers in our primary school and our secondary schools have laptops, and ensuring that we have better connectivity to our schools, just stronger to a lot more schools, maybe 2/3 of our schools, relative to when we went into the pandemic. There are many schools in Jamaica who, during periods of rain or other situations, they seamlessly go to the online space, and I'm sure those schools will utilize that modality if needed. Ideally, we love all our students to be in the face-to-face mode, but there may be situations in which the schools can pivot in part or in whole, and we are saying to schools that you have the permission to use different modalities as we work our way through the damage of the hurricane.
Thank you, Minister. I have a question online for you regarding book vouchers. How can parents access book vouchers to assist in purchasing books this year?
I know book vouchers are generally available through the office of all members of Parliament, and so that would have to be where parents go in the particular constituency in which they live to make that request.
Thank you, Minister. Question?
My question is for Minister of Information, Dana. I would like to ask you about Haiti and the soldiers that are supposed to be going over to Haiti. I'm Zara Burton, by the way, with 18 Degrees North.
Yes.
I wanted to get a sense of the timeline of that. Are they already there? Mm-hmm. And also, I wanted to find out if the Canadian government, which was supposed to be sending military personnel to train Jamaican military personnel, how's that going? And also, how much money has the Canadian government and the US government committed to Jamaica specifically, not to the overall mission, because that's publicly reported already, but how much money have they committed to Jamaica specifically for the sending of troops to Haiti? And if we haven't yet sent troops to Haiti, why not?
All right, thank you. And I think I'm going to have to take the answers after. I'm just going to clarify a few things. If you don't mind, I will answer all of your questions at the end. We didn't have a discussion on Haiti in the last cabinet meeting, but we've had several discussions around Haiti in terms of ensuring that we do have the troops ready to deploy to Haiti. I just need to confirm some of the questions you had in terms of are they already there, and also in terms of the specifics in terms of funding. But at the end, I'll come back and answer your questions.
Sure.
All right.
And those two, the JDF, I think, would be very happy to give you some details.
Yes.
I'm sure that sometimes we can probably send some of those questions to the JDF as well.
Yeah.
All right. One more from Jamila, and then we close over to Minister Vaz.
Is this for Minister of Education?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, Minister, I have you sprinting out here.
It's
I
okay.
wanted to find out the status of the recruitment for the teachers from overseas. How's that going so far, in light of what we're seeing? And the academic school year is fast approaching, so want to find out what's
All
happening.
right, so I'm going to ask PS to take that question.
Good morning to our ministers and members of the media, members of the public. So, with respect to our expanded international recruitment program, just let me update our nation that, you know, sometimes we take some things for granted. As the world is challenged with respect to the teaching profession and recruiting and maintaining and sustaining the cadre of teachers to deploy in their schools, we have a number of international organizations that have been in Jamaica recruiting. But interestingly, as we are trying to put our response together for this year, we have been addressed by other international countries. Actually, they came to us indicating that Jamaica is a lovely place. They have oversupply of teachers, and they would want their teachers to have the opportunity to serve in Jamaica. We did our research, and we have found that many of these countries, international organizations and other countries have also recruited from these spaces. And so we got some confidence from that with respect to our research. So we have the Philippines, their ambassador, they have met with us. We have the ambassador from Ghana, who also came, paid a visit to our minister, and has met with us with his team. And just this week, he has indicated that a team from Ghana will be in Jamaica in the week of the 11th of August to finalize conversations with us as to access to their teachers in Ghana. What is interesting with this discussion, colleagues, is that they are interested in working for the same emoluments as we offer to our teachers in Jamaica. Nothing more. And in some instances, we are getting a number of volunteers who have also expressed some interest in, you know, being deployed to assist with our shortage that we have right here in Jamaica. And predominantly our areas are mathematics and the sciences for this year. In addition to that, I think we have seen some increases in our language teachers, our specialists for English language. We have seen some persons resigning as well. But I need to say to the country that we are not seeing the great shift as we saw last year in the number of resignations at this time. So for the way forward, we have our Cuban program. Those persons are with us. We have 75 of those persons with us, and they are coming back to Jamaica to start in the new academic year. In addition to that, we have nationals from 15 other countries right here in Jamaica. So that's about 90 persons already serving in our education system. And a number of those persons were recruited through schools, with, of course, the ministry's blessing. So those persons are already deployed, and they're from the USA, from the Philippines, from Nigeria, from India, and a number of other countries. And now we are being joined again with the interests of the Philippines, Ghana, and we are looking forward to those conversations. The interesting thing about our response is not to force this kind of engagement, but more so to provide options. As you know, as per the education regulation, the recruitment is really the remit of our boards of management. Our responsibility as a ministry is to provide options for our principals. Our CEO did a survey trying to solicit her to obtain the interest of our principals and school boards in utilizing this opportunity. And I must say, we have got tremendous response from our school principals, and we used that data to have the conversation with our international partners. So we are being guided by data. We are being guided by the support on the ground, and our responsibility is to provide the options. We are not forcing, but our schools must have options as they try to make sure that their staff members are in place for the new academic year. So we are advanced, and we are grateful for the opportunity for other persons to see what we have to offer as a country and try to access that as we advance the education mission. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much, Naomi, for marshalling those questions. And we are going to move right along. We're at 9:34, so I am going to move to our next guest, and we're very happy to have Mr. Hewitt here with us, the Director General of the Office of Utilities Regulation, and he is going to come to address us in relation to the role of the OUR in getting us back in terms of our utilities and getting our utilities back up for our customers. Please join me. Is this your first time at PostCab? Welcome.
Debut, Minister, and thank you very much.
I wish you luck. Thank you.
Acknowledging the presence of other ministers as well, acknowledging the presence of my colleagues who came with me from the OUR and will provide support in answering questions should they arise. Acknowledging the presence of the media. Good to be with you this morning. Now, the Office of Utilities Regulation has oversight of the main utilities, namely electricity, water, and sewage, and telecommunications. We accept that a most vital part of that responsibility is to hold the providers to their obligation to provide service, preferably uninterrupted, but in the event of interruption, however caused, to restoration at the earliest time possible. I also consider it important in this presentation to say that depending on the scale and duration of an interruption, the OUR is required to undertake a forensic examination into causation, actions before, during, and after the event, and to determine if there have been breaches. In this context, and as a public body, the OUR, in the exercise of its functions, and in particular its decision-making, employs natural justice principles that embody a duty to act fairly towards all of its stakeholders. This includes the reservation of judgment on matters until it investigates and verifies facts to avoid suggestions of bias, and also consultation with affected parties observing their right to be heard. The OUR also provides reasons for its decisions to ensure that the regulatory best practice of accountability, transparency, and consistency are applied. This does not, however, prevent us from insisting that the utilities exercise due diligence to restore service in the shortest possible time and to provide customers with update on the progress reported to us, our assessment of the situation, the initiatives we have taken, the instructions we have issued to the utilities, and our expectations for the future. My presentation today is guided by these considerations. Now, all the major utilities are required to initiate their disaster planning process and activate preparedness and readiness protocols prior to the beginning of the hurricane season to enhance their ability to respond to and recover from the impact of hurricanes likely to occur during the season. The OUR requested and received these reports. In the case of the Jamaica Public Service Company Limited, it is required to detail in its report its maintenance schedule for the transmission and distribution network, the scope of work carried out and work in progress, the stockpile of material or components in inventory specifically designated for hurricanes and other disaster events, such as poles, transformers, conductors, switches, fuses, etc., to indicate what disaster simulation exercises have been carried out, and system restoration resource requirement in anticipation of hurricane activity or major storm events during the period. As is the practice, JPS submitted a report on its hurricane preparation for 2024 to the OUR before the start of the season, which was reviewed and discussed with the company prior to Hurricane Beryl. There is also an established framework in place that outlines the strategy and procedures to guide the restoration process after a disaster event, system emergency, or major system failure. This also involves procedures for the coordination of restoration activities between key stakeholders, including government, agencies, and disaster preparedness organizations. Post-burial activities. Following the passage of Hurricane Beryl, this restoration strategy was deployed by the JPS under the regulatory oversight of the OUR, with communication and coordination between generating entities, system users, including health facilities and other entities. The NWC is a critical entity there. Since the commencement of the restoration activities, the process has been under constant regulatory monitoring, and the OUR has had several meetings with the JPS to address certain developments and issues in the system restoration process. We have conveyed to JPS in all our engagements that we expect that it will exercise all diligence to expedite restoration. In our last meeting with JPS on Monday, July 29, they assured us that all service will be restored by the 12th of August, even in the most critically damaged areas, including Westmoreland, Manchester, Clarendon, and St. Elizabeth, Eastern Hanover, and in Western Hanover, for which it claims a peculiarity, by August 15. I received a report this morning, however, that Western Hanover is also scheduled to be back by August 12th. That report also indicated that the number of customers still not receiving service was 21,514 as of Monday, July 29, and this figure is to be updated with the connections that would have been made on the 30th. The OUR is aware that these dates and numbers are very small comfort to customers who have been without service since July 3, and so we have urged the company to take every possible step, including the engagement of additional resources to shorten these timelines. In any event, given that the company has missed previously established restoration dates, the OUR will be issuing a directive for it to comply with the timelines it has given. If they are missed, the JPS will be required to show that it took all reasonable steps within its means to have secured compliance. In executing its regulatory mandate, the OUR has had to address billing issues to safeguard customers' interests. In order to provide certainty to customers and to hold the utilities accountable for its quality of service performance, the OUR prescribed guaranteed standards, which states that JPS and NWC should issue no more than 2 consecutive estimated bills to customers, provided there is access to the meter. In addition, estimated bills should be determined based on the average of the last 3 actual readings. This holds during normal times. However, in the case of a force majeure situation, the responsible minister can provide a formal waiver upon an application by JPS. In the wake of Hurricane Beryl, when it came to our attention that JPS had notified its customers of a wide-scale use of estimated bills, the OUR summoned the company to a meeting to get details on customer impact and whether there could be other considerations. At that meeting, JPS reported that as of July 22nd, 485,000 bills were issued. 363,000 of those bills were based on actual meter readings, and 122 were based on estimated consumption. A further 226,000 bills were to be issued, 170,000 of which would be actual, and 56,000 estimates. For the estimates, 36,000 relate to customers with smart meters and 20,000 to manually read meters. Arising from this engagement with JPS, we have approved its proposal to adopt the following approach with respect to some 56,000 estimated bills that were not already issued. For 36,000 of these bills, which are for customers with smart meters, the bill for the cycle is to be issued based on the last recorded reading. For the remaining 20,000, which are for manual meters, the bill should be issued applying a factor of 0.6 to take account of days in the billing cycle for which they had no electricity supply. This means that JPS will assess affected customers' bills at 60% of their normal charge, or put another way, these customers will see a 40% reprieve on the estimated bills they would otherwise have been required to pay. In addition to its request for the OUR to approve the application of the 0.6 factor to the consumption estimate based on the last 3 readings to determine the net consumption, JPS has also requested the OUR to do a number of other things. 1, suspend or waive the requirements relating to the treatment of bills that show a monthly variance of plus or minus 30%. Suspend or waive the OUR's directive to adhere to a maximum of 31 days of service for the August billing period. As a practical consideration, the OUR has agreed to the above request. The OUR also instructed JPS to revert to it on the proposed treatment of the 122,000 customers who had already received estimated bills, and in particular, those among that grouping who had significant number of days of no electricity usage. We are awaiting JPS's proposal on this. After our meeting with JPS, the company announced a 20% discount to approximately 350,000 residential customers who use 150 kilowatt hours or less of electricity, and a one-off of 1,500 top-up of electricity credit for prepaid residential accounts. The OUR has commended JPS on these initiatives, but has also pointed out to the company that for customers still without service, this does not represent a benefit. JPS has assured us that this situation will be taken into consideration in its dealing with customers whose electricity supply is still not restored. Additionally, JPS is also to clarify the methodology to be applied to effect the discount. I should state here that similar to what happened during COVID, JPS has applied for the waiving of its guaranteed standards and overall standards. For the guaranteed standards, JPS has asked that it not be held accountable for breaches which would normally require financial compensation to customers. This request was made to the Minister as is a requirement under the license. The Honourable Minister has in turn sought the OUR's advice. As a part of the analysis of the application, we'll gather additional information and assess the extent to which events outside of its reasonable control have negatively impacted JPS's performance of its license obligation, and which could not have been prevented or overcome by reasonable diligence as contemplated by the license. But we also regulate other utilities, and the NWC has applied for the waiver of some of its guaranteed standards, and the OUR is currently reviewing that request. I want to turn now to the updates on the restoration of services that we have received from the major providers. Regarding the telecom providers, we can report that as at July 29, Digicel reported that it has restored service to 96% of its mobile customers and 98% of its fixed customers. Restoration has moved Flow's mobile population coverage to 92%, and service has been restored to 91% of the fixed customers that were impacted by Beryl. The telecom providers report that one of the factors impacting full restoration is the lack of commercial power, which caused some cell sites to continue to be off here. Some of these sites have generators as a backup energy source, while some rely solely on electricity provided by JPS. The initial report received indicated the number of fixed network nodes and customer impacted and the number of cell sites off here in each parish. The NWC also reports that the lack of electricity hampered its restoration efforts in some instances. As at the 25th of July, the NWC reported that 94% of the 179 pumps it identified as critical have been energized as at 10 p.m. on Thursday, the 25th. Now, JPS, in a report this morning, has indicated that that is now at 96% as of 1 p.m. yesterday. And the NWC also indicated that 318 of its pumps are being monitored by JPS, which include the critical list already mentioned, and that 86% of this total were energized as of Thursday. JPS has reported this morning that that number is actually now 335, and the number restored is actually 86% still. So the question that has been asked is, why is it taking so long? And some of the explanation that has been provided to us, of course, and that will have to be examined later on, is, but it is to be understood that power restoration after a major event is a very complex undertaking. At its simplest, it's a matter of assessing whether any damage was done to the infrastructure, and if there are any materials such as metals like zinc sheet impacting power line, post, etc. If not, the line is re-energized. There must also be acute attention to the safety issue. JPS has asserted that the more complex matters are what is causing the delays and giving rise to the understandable impatience among customers. The company has also suggested that the current configuration of its system, geographical terrain, and access issues are among the peculiarities contributing to this. Some of those matters must be carefully considered as an examination is done in the aftermath of the event. I'm going to conclude with a number of observations, statements. A question has been asked as to what is the authority of the OUR. Two key obligations of JPS under the regulatory regime include the provision of an adequate, safe, and efficient electricity service based on modern standards at reasonable rates to all of Jamaica. The other is that JPS shall maintain and repair all relevant assets throughout the term of the license in accordance with good industry practices. The OUR Act, the Electricity Act, and the license provide specific powers for the OUR, creating a toolkit by which it exercises its function. These include powers to direct, investigate, conduct inquiries, request information, review maintenance plans, and approve and monitor quality standards. As I outlined earlier, the OUR has been exercising these powers prior to the hurricane season, and in the wake of Hurricane Beryl, we will also be conducting the post-mortem of the event, which is even more critical in learning lessons for the rest of the season and beyond. As indicated earlier as well, we will also be issuing JPS with specific directives with respect to the remaining timelines with which we expect strict compliance. We're monitoring the restoration of all utilities and doing ad hoc verification and surveillance. Ultimately, as well, there's an audit function for conformity. We have been careful to manage the regulatory reporting burden we impose on the utilities so as not to impact restoration efforts, which takes priority. Some of the initiatives announced by the utilities by way of discounts, bills adjustments, suspension of disconnection, and additional time to pay are the direct result of engagement with our providers. I also should note that our examination of reports submitted by JPS and the application of Q-factor penalties indicated network issues that required resolution. In discussions, JPS gave clear commitment to resolving them. And indeed, the OUR is aware that this process was in train. The extent to which some or all of these were overtaken by Beryl is a matter for subsequent determination. Typically, in a regulatory regime, there are provisions for sanctions. And given that this has been raised specifically to JPS, I'd wish to point out that there are some provisions for this in both the application of the guaranteed standards and the Q-factor regimes. Under the Q-factor regime, sanctions are applied for underperformance. There are also other powers of sanctions that require proceedings through the court and judicial process. But this is clearly not the kind of provision that are available to you in emergencies. because they tend to be time-consuming. There is also legislative provision for the imposition of a fixed penalty without going to court, and this is actually in train, and I have the assurance from the Minister that these are going to be approved in short order. So I wish to close with a focus on regulatory initiatives beyond burial. Every disaster provides us with opportunities to revisit our pre-, midst-of, and post-disaster arrangements. Notably, out of previous disasters came the Electricity Disaster Fund, to which there will be a resort to recover from burial. In the ensuing months, we will need to take account of the same lessons learned from burial and how we can further harden our infrastructure and make them more resilient. I wish to note, however, that there is always a trade-off between cost and these features. It is the reality. However, we cannot resile from engaging on these issues to provide the best way forward. Another notable and relevant initiative is the work we started last year to look at what force majeure considerations can be put in place as a standard for customers and not having these solely be at the discretion of the utility providers. As the Honourable Minister has pointed out, that the utility think about force majeure in terms of its own operations, but there ought to be some force majeure considerations in terms of the consumers, and therefore we're looking at those. That work is going to take on even greater impetus for the future. We have also developed a protocol for reporting on telecommunications outages, which will be implemented later this year. The decision will also require national roaming in the case of disasters or emergencies, and require licensees to conduct an annual risk analysis of their critical facilities in accordance with their established internal audit procedures and take measures to reduce their network vulnerability. It will also require licensees to prepare and submit to the OUR disaster preparedness and business continuity plans, which shall be in accordance with the requirements and recommendations of international standards such as ISO 22301 for business continuity management systems and plans, and ISO 21110 for emergency preparedness and response plans. We're also in discussion with MSET regarding the development of a national emergency telecommunications plan. This is a strategy that indicates the telecom-supported activities during disaster or emergencies, the role and responsibilities of all stakeholders, and the step-by-step actions to be taken by each stakeholder in the different phases of the disaster management cycle. The need to focus on how to prevent one utility from becoming a single point of failure is also flagged in the wake of burial. There is indeed much work being done and to be done. Maybe another of the immediate post-burial lessons is that we should be less silent about it. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Because the questions will be kind of directed to both the OUR head and Minister Vaz, I'm going to have Minister Vaz just make a few statements, and then we'll just open up fully for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. So, they have a saying, better late than never. And I think that is what we can say for the detailed presentation made by the OUR, so persons can have a full understanding as to their role and function as a regulatory body, oversight body for utilities. I have some information which I would like to pass on, and just to say and briefly comment on the OUR's presentation. Two main points that they made, and that is the need for monitoring of the maintenance aspect of the JPS license. There is no ifs, ands, or buts in my own mind that if better maintenance was carried out pre-burial, not months before burial, I'm speaking about years, that we would not be in the situation that we are in now, because we have the evidence that areas still don't have light that were least affected by the weather event. And when I say least affected, I'm speaking about minimal rain and minimum breeze, not to mention the squall line, which winds are less than a tropical depression, and what effect on that had on customers on Friday night, and the length of time to restore the 10,000 customers. And the second thing is the issue of the force majeure. And the force majeure, which I have referred to the OUR and referred to the Attorney General's chambers, only speaks about what is good for the JPS and what benefits the JPS, and has nothing in it in relation to the poor suffering customers of the JPS. So I am happy, Mr. Hewitt, that you singled out those 2 points, because that is where my heart is. The rest of it is a lot of rhetoric and fine print, and of course, fine. But those are the issues that concern me. And lastly, the JPS, and by virtue of the OUR's presentation, always speak about the percentage. And the percentage is 96 and 94 and 97 and whatever it is. Percentages are not affected by beryl. Customers are affected. So the percentage means absolutely nothing to me. It means a lot to them, because it means that they are almost there. They are 90-odd%. The only percentage that I'm interested in is 100%. Anything other than that, don't tell me about it. So we have 25,000 customers that were affected as of last week, Friday, when I met with the JPS Friday morning. And the presentation that I have here today, which OUR confirmed, is they are down to about 21,000. Today is 4 weeks to the day that beryl hit. And the bottom line is 4 weeks is sufficient to make sure that the 21,000 customers that are still affected, and those are household customers. So it's not 21,000 people. It is 21,000 customers, which is probably over 100,000 people if you put 4 or 5 to a household. Not to mention the communities, the deep rural communities that are still affected, not only with the lack of electricity, but the lack of water, because several of the pumps are still not connected, for which I will get to. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Cabinet summoned the OUR to give a report on Monday, which was Monday gone, 2 days ago. And just to let you know that concerns were expressed, as I have been expressing, regarding the missed deadlines by the JPS Restoration of Electricity and their initial refusal to access, at the beginning, external assistance. Some of the concerns and directives given by the Cabinet and voiced strongly by the Prime Minister is concerns regarding the decision taken by the JPS without consultation to issue estimated bills to customers. The Attorney General was asked to opine on the powers that the Minister or the government, the GOJ, has within the existing legal framework to direct OUR and the JPS relative to their obligations under the license. The powers of the OUR has to direct the JPS relative to their obligations under the license for the maintenance and return of electricity supply. What penalties the OUR can employ in pursuance of any action that may be required. Preparation should begin on any amendments necessary to the license and to address gaps in the legislative framework. Cabinet expressed dissatisfaction with the pace of the return of electricity by the JPS to customers impacted by the hurricane. Cabinet also expressed concern that the OUR as a regulator has not been vocal enough in a definitive manner since the hurricane, and the customers have been deprived of service. It was the OUR as a regulatory that should lead the process of holding the utility provider to account and provide the public with the assurances that the framework of managing public utility through an independent regulator was working and was effective in the way of managing the public utility. The OUR should present at the post-cabinet press briefing, which we are at now, to provide the public with an update, for which they have done a fulsome presentation this morning. It's also important that the OUR as regulator to make clear in the mind of the public that they were active in order to ensure public confidence, as it can only not the view of the public that the government was expected to act when the power was with the entity. I suspect Cabinet is speaking about me and my utterances over the last few weeks, for which I have no apology. So, let's get into the meat of it. So, currently, as was said, 21,000 customers are out of electricity. The resource allocation that I've been making a lot of noise about remains the same. So as a result of my meeting last week Friday, there were 1,155 persons between employees of the JPS and contractors, and that number remains the same today. So my advice either has not been heeded or they are unable to get any more contractors externally or within Jamaica, which I find very hard to believe. The additional deployment, there has been further engagement with the USAID and also Manitoba Hydroelectric of Canada, who have responded positively, and they are supposed to provide JPS with the final deployment schedule. As it relates to USAID, discussions ongoing with JPS and USAID regarding logistics, safety protocol, and scope of nature of assistance to be provided. I suspect that if the JPS is held to account by the OUR, then I suspect that the timelines that have been given for restoration and the external assistance that is to come will probably collide in relation to the timing, as Kingston and St. Andrew still is on schedule for full restoration by July 31st. St. Catherine, the same, 31st of July. Trelawney, the same, August. Northern Trelawney, August 2nd, and Southern Trelawney, within the boundary of Manchester, August 12th. I'm not sure if the OER has gotten them to review those dates. St. James, August 5th. St. Anne, August 10th. St. Mary, August 5th. St. Thomas, full restoration completed on the 26th of July. Portland, July 31st. What's today? We look forward to the close of business today for Portland. St. Elizabeth, St. Elizabeth, is it August 10th? August 12th. Parts of Clarendon, Westmoreland, for Hanover, August 12th for Eastern Hanover. I think that might have been brought forward to the 10th. No? Oh, Western Hanover, August 5th. This is saying Eastern the 12th and Western the 5th. So I'm not quite sure. In relation to Westmoreland, Clarendon, and parts of Manchester, I think the dates remain August 12th. So let me just reconfirm that these are the projections by the JPS. And as I said before, we all know that all deadlines have been missed so far. What I can tell you from where I sit and where I stand is that the areas that are coming into me from the members of Parliament on both sides of the aisle and the amount of communities. I just got one a while ago, which I will speak to, and that is in one constituency in St. Mary, Southeast St. Mary. 26 communities as of right now are still without electricity. So if that is one constituency, and there is 3 constituencies in St. Mary, I just give you an idea of what the challenge is going to be to meet these deadlines without additional resources. I don't want to, as they say in Jamaica, set my goat mouth, because I want everybody to get back their power. However, I am again calling on the JPS based on the information that I have, which is real-time, real information coming out of the constituencies across Jamaica, that there is still a lot of work to do and a short time to do it. There are still 45 NWC pumps that are out. No restoration of electricity. There are still 5 of 8 National Irrigation Commission wells that are not energized. So right away, if 45 pumps are not energized for NWC, it means that thousands of people do not have water and do not have light 4 weeks into burial. It means that if 5 of 8 NIC wells are not energized, it means that thousands of farmers are unable to start back their livelihood, because if you don't have the irrigation, you cannot replant and expect to get a good result. There are police stations. I just got a message from the Commissioner of Police. There are 6 police stations still without electricity. Malvern, Newmarket, Crosskeys, Asia, K-Valley, and Warsop. Not to mention that there are 82, there are 14 Digicel cell towers that are not energized, and there is 477 of 658 flow. So you have almost 200 flow cell sites that are still not energized. I am calling on the JPS again to prioritize these essential services and get them back up so we can start to see the restoration of various sectors in Jamaica. We have 45% of the 450 schools that are not or do not have any electricity. So 45% of 450 is approximately almost half, 200 schools. We know that back to school is upon us, and therefore we have to be proactive, because the Minister of Education is already on me, to make sure that we try as best as possible with those schools that can be connected, that have no damage, or the damage has been rectified, so that the children can go back to school September morning. So again, OUR, I'm reflagging that for you. I will send you the list because we do not want another situation where 4 weeks into the back to school, we are facing schools without any electricity, cannot learn without electricity. So the OUR would have spoken to fixed penalties, and I would have spoken to Cabinet's position in relation to the concerns and the way forward in relation to making sure that we never, ever, in any future disaster, have to do and go through what we are going through now. The utility company must be very clear on the terms of the license, and we, as a government, and OUR as a regulator, must make sure that within a disaster and outside of a disaster, what is to be done is done to the benefit of the country and the customers. Lastly, but not least, currently, the JPS says they have suspended disconnections to August 15th. They will not be restoring many parishes fully until between the 5th, the 10th, and the 12th of August. And therefore, I find it highly unreasonable, uncaring, insensitive that a date like that could have been put forward. And I'm calling on the JPS and the OUR to revise what JPS put out in their statement after rescinding the estimated bills, to make sure that renegotiations are done and that ample time for the affected customers are given to them to be able to restore their lives and their livelihoods without the pressure of an excessive JPS bill to face them while going through so much other trials and tribulations. I close by saying I am prepared to work with the OUR, I'm prepared to walk with the OUR, and I will continue to be the advocate representing the government of Jamaica to protect the people of Jamaica. Thank you. All right, I think we have questions.
Yes, thank you, Minister. So you can go to the
Thank
other
you.
lectern. Yes.
Thank you, Minister. And we'll just go straight to questions. Mr. Hewitt, do you want to join us up here?
Fantastic. Thank you so much. All right, Minister.
We're on the same page. We're beside one another.
You want to take this mic?
Only person missing is the JPS.
No, Minister, you can stay, okay. And they'll share that mic. All right, let's start off with the birthday boy today, Mahiri from Nationwide.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
You get backlight? All right. All right. You okay for your birthday?
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Mahir Stewart from Nationwide News here. Question to Mr. Hewitt. So we're still at the beginning of the hurricane season. We're only in July. Going forward, how is the OUR working with utility providers to improve infrastructure resilience and prevent similar disruptions and reduce delays in the event of a future disaster later this year?
Right. So, and thanks for that question. I think I kind of indicated some of the things we're doing in the presentation I made. Clearly, there are limited things that you can do for the rest of the hurricane season. And the priority now has been get restoration as quickly as possible. Now, implied in that as well is that while you are restoring the system, while they have been restoring the system, those systems are indeed vulnerable. So as soon as the restoration is completed, and we have had the discussion with JPS, they have to go back through to harden the system. The same will have to happen with the telecommunications providers. So, you know, we can pray that we don't have another event. But the point is that we need to get the restoration done, and we also need to take measures to harden the system as quickly as possible.
All right, thank you. And my second question would be, is there any reason why the OUR didn't issue any public statements on the disruptions to the key utilities after the passage of Hurricane Beryl? I guess the question is, what is your role in ensuring that the consumers have their service restored in the shortest possible time?
Right. So we made a judgment as to the extent of a public statement that we'd make. And also because there is a requirement that after this event has passed, we're going to have to look back at how everybody performed. And we want to be able to say that we are doing so with an objective eye. We didn't want to make statements that could be said to be prejudicial, and therefore we're reluctant to speak. We think also that we've now got to the point where, part of the thing you do in the immediate aftermath of the disaster is to assess what has happened and to assess what you will need to recover. The dates that are, it is expected that if you give dates too quickly, perhaps you run the risk of bad assessment. Right? So we believe that the utilities are at a point, they're way past the point, I think, where they must know exactly what is required to recover and can give proper timelines and so on. So hence, it's a good time to talk because and to issue directives, because we don't think that those directives are now going to be, you can then say, well, the dates we gave you were preliminary.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hewitt. And let's go to the other question.
Good morning. Zara Burton with 18 Degrees North. This question is from Mr. Hewitt. I would like to ask about the Electric Disaster Fund and whether JPS has actually requested or put in a claim to that fund, and what's the amount of money it has claimed from it. Because in Hurricane Dean, I think, based on public information, it was US $7 million roughly that they got. This fund, I just want to get a sense JPS put in for, and also who funds it, the fund?
Okay. So the EDF, the Electricity Disaster Fund, is a fund, and I'm not necessarily answering the questions in the order you have raised them, but the fund is actually put together from your bills. So there is a premium included in your electricity bill that goes towards this fund. Because what it is supposed to do is substitute for insurance. After Gilbert, it was, and some other disasters, it was very difficult for JPS to get insurance for its outside plant. We took the decision then that it was important to have a fund. And so it is pretty much seeking to ape what an insurance does. JPS, when there's a disaster, JPS will make a claim. We will look at the invoices, we'll look at the measures that were taken, we will look at what was the state of the infrastructure. Just as an insurance company would say, well, there were some things wrong with your motor vehicle or your house before this disaster, and therefore you can't claim everything. So we will look at those things to see if there is any discount in regard to those things, and we make an assessment and a payout. JPS, there is a provision for JPS to tap into the fund before a disaster to help prepare for at the beginning of the hurricane season. And JPS did in fact make an application for $7 million at the beginning of this hurricane season. We assessed their application, and what we approved was $4.5 million, given the level of inventory that we thought they needed. We also have a provision where they can ask for an advance from the fund if they are having a difficulty in funding the restoration. So we haven't had an ask on that yet. So no, we have not had any claim from JPS as at this point. And the amount in the fund is roughly, it would be just about $50 million because US dollars.
All right, thank you. Minister, I know today is a marathon day. We do have another function in this very room, so we'll go another 3 minutes and then we can wrap up at 10:30. Yes, a follow-up.
to Mr. Hewitt, I just want to clarify. So you're saying JPS already got US $4.5 million for Beryl, and they haven't yet submitted another claim.
Right. We approved 4.5, and they haven't submitted any other claim.
But will they? And
we expect them to.
You expect them to. And do you expect a similar size claim, US or?
As at this point, I have no idea, so I wouldn't.
Okay. Right. Okay. All right. And then Minister Morris Dixon, my outstanding question,
sure.
please. Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions for Minister Vaz?
Let me just say,
yes, go ahead, Minister.
That's in perspective. The 4.5 million is just a touch under 700 million Jamaican dollars that would have been drawn down by the JPS before, in preparation for the hurricane season. So once again, that just strengthens my argument in relation to the fact that they had more than enough resources, financial resources, to be able to plan and execute the recovery of a disaster, which we have had, in a timely manner. They would have gotten it before hurricanes, when they made the hurricane season.
I think the approval would have been, was it in May? Or is it, I think it was in May. It was
before the hurricane season. So the point I'm making is that preparations were made and funds were released to be able to prepare in relation to the resources in terms of transformers, poles, lines, whatever it is that they needed. And of course, as I said before, human resources.
All right. Thank you, Minister.
All right. Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. And thank you to OUR. Hopefully we'll see more of you here at the post-cabinet press briefing. As we said, Cabinet was very adamant that the OUR needs to speak as the independent regulator, that we needed to hear from them. And I really thank them for being here, and the entire team. Thank you for all being here. But we're not finished yet. There was one more question, I know, which Ms. Burton had asked in relation to Haiti. And I don't think my responses will change, but we have trained 222 individuals in their phase 1 training. In terms of, you asked when will they be deployed, we don't have a deployment date. The reality is that with the passage of Hurricane Beryl, as you know, many of our JDF personnel have been deployed across Jamaica. That is our priority at this time, is supporting the recovery from Hurricane Beryl. So we do not have a date in terms of when or if they will be deployed. You had asked also in terms of US and Canada specifically giving Jamaica money. I have no such information. All I have is the pool of funds that both countries have indicated they will provide to support Haiti and to support that multinational team that would be in Haiti, but nothing specific that's been given to Jamaica in that respect. If anything changes, I will let you know. All right. Do you have an anticipation of when we will see a deployment? No, there wouldn't. We are looking at the JDF as their priority being Jamaica. And that's our focus. If they're now all over the country, we know they're definitely deployed in southwest Jamaica. The DART has been deployed, which is an important team. They are helping with the rebuilding efforts. That's our priority now. I think once we move past the issues with Beryl in another few months, then we can reassess whether or not we have resources that we can deploy elsewhere. Jamaica is the priority right now. All right, and thank you, all you. I know tomorrow is our Emancipation Day, and there are a lot of events happening. We've had to scale it back. It's never good to be celebrating when there are people who are hurting, and there are a lot of Jamaicans who are hurting, do not have water, do not have electricity still. And so the celebrations have been scaled down, but it's important to mark the milestones of our emancipation and also independence. And so I say happy emancipation, happy independence to all Jamaicans, and we look forward to seeing you at some of the events that we are having, even if they are scaled down. And we will see you soon for another edition of our post-cabinet press briefing. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody, for thank you, everybody, for coming. Unfortunately, we may have to ask you to quickly exit because we have another function that starts in literally